Today we're going to grab our scrap wood and we're going to build 3 super simple solutions to frustrations that every woodworker faces. And we're going to start with 2 of the most common ones, sanding and dust collection. So let's start making. So this has been driving me nuts for ages, ever since I got this really heavy Festool hose. Don't get me wrong, I love it, but you can't put it on your workbench and just leave it there ready to clean up in between doing jobs. And the problem is, it carries quite a lot of weight, and a lot of the weight is not the bit you're using. So that it sits on the floor or it sits down lower than the bit you're using. So if you want to put it to one side, do a job, clean up in between, it's not going to stay on the workbench and be waiting for you when you get to the next clean. So I think there's a simple solution and a complicated solution. I'm going to start simple, and if that works, prototyping wise, well then we'll prototype something that's a little bit more complicated. And as this is a prototyping video, we'll keep it rough and ready. The first thing I want to keep this hose on the workbench and just not have it slip away. It's not asking a lot, so let's get the scrap wood out and, well, see what we can come up with. And the hose is 35mm. Now I think I'm going to have to cut above the halfway line because this is going to clamp the hose. So if I cut above it, that's just going to leave this bit here thinner than 35. So theoretically, it'll clamp the hose in. Now I did say this will be rough and ready. I've just got 2 extra pieces to thicken it out, and I'm going to glue all of this together. But before I do any of that, I'm going to sand out the internal and I'm going to round off these sharper edges so it doesn't fray the hose itself, and then glue it together, trim it down, and then, well, you'll see. It'll all come together in the end. Yeah, that's okay, but it's not great. So, I've got a bit of an order of operations things here, because this needs trimming, but while it's in a big block, I'm just going to drill into the bottom, which is why I gave it all this extra meat, is so I can drill a hole in the bottom, 20mm, Forstner bit, and then, once that's done, I don't need all of this bulk, so I can trim it down, make it look, I don't know, halfway decent. It is quite small. If you haven't got a little crosscut sled like me, just use some hand tools on this, because what you don't want is to be freehanding this across a table saw probably. If you've got a bandsaw, you might feel comfortable doing it. And then once we've done that, it's pretty much there. Now in many ways, you might think that this is done. You can clip it on your hose and then drop it in a dog hole, and suddenly the hose isn't running off the table between uses. So you can pick it up and use it. And then when you're finished, just pop it down. But if you thought that this is where I was going to leave it, this may be your first start making video, because I really quite like to over-engineer things. And this is going to be no exception. This, as it stands, is a small workshop win. I think we can do better, and so I'm going to try. Because the other issue that you've got in the workshop is your sander. And these, well, these normally end up on the floor if you haven't got a decent space for them. And really, these two could kind of do with being next to each other. Now this isn't complicated. I've got no idea how I'm going to do it, but I kind of know roughly. Let's quickly do this and then show you how I plan to over-engineer that. Okay, so in every prototyping video, there's the moment of success or fail. And it hinges on 2 things really. 1, have I succeeded? Does it help me? 2, have I succeeded for you guys? Does it help you? Because I might have just solved my own problem and not anybody else's. The fact is, my assumption is if you've got one of these, you probably need somewhere to store it. So this bit is pretty useful for everybody, but I've added this block on with a 20mm hole going all the way through it, because I think that's going to help me with the next bit. And I just put a French cleat on the back. Finish sanding, pop it away. Now, caveat, if you're worried that this isn't robust enough on your sander to hold it upright, you might have to find a different solution. This is the bit that I'm prototyping though that really, it excites me, because remember this for the dog hole? Well, I think this is fun because you can either just remove the hose or take the whole thing and then clear one of your dog holes and then just have it on your workbench. But for yourselves, when you're considering storing anything in your workshop, there's a couple of things that you should consider. 1, where it's going to be and what's around it. 2, the movement of that tool. So if you're going to be taking it off the wall and taking it to your workbench, make sure that it's got a free journey to get there and then back again afterwards. The biggest problem with the hose is obviously it's sticking upwards. I personally think the block should be more middling down here, but it has led me to think of what might be a better solution. And with that, we're going to try another prototype. And I think it's going to be a really good one. A lot of the pieces are the same as this, so I'll spare you the building of those, and then you can tell me what you think. Have I solved my problem, or have I solved a few people's problems? So here it is. Very similar to the last one. I want to be careful with this. I want to cut it with the smallest possible kerf saw I've got. So I know I want to remove it straight across the middle because I want it to then be able to clamp down and not crush the hose. This is 45mm as opposed to 35, and I've rounded off the edges because the hose is going to go in and out through it and be moved. I also want it to pivot. I just want it to be able to move slightly so that it doesn't just stay static and get pulled like this. So I think I'm going to sink a dog into it like I did before, and then that will go into a dog hole on top of the mounting point. I'm hoping that's enough. But for this to work, I need it to be able to pivot and lock. And I think this is really clever. I'm just gluing the pieces back together so I can drill one hole through that will align in both pieces. So I can use this small dowel as a hinge. Now this would not have worked if I'd have drilled both pieces individually. Small workshop win right there. I've also made a lock and a fitted dog. Let me show you. Am I proud of this? Yeah. But basically, I've just put a little pin in here, pull the pin out. It won't open on its own without the pin being slightly out. And if it gets in the way of the hose, you can just pull it off. But for a prototype, and for now, that is the head of what we need to make. Now we need to make the most important part of something that I know is going to be useful for every small workshop. And it's easy from here on out. Cut some 35mm battens in 3/4 inch ply. 35mm is not an important number, but I've also got a little sheet of 5mm ply. I've also cut a longer section of the 3/4 inch ply into, again, 35mm width, and I've glued two together. Then I've taken the shorter battens and I've glued them together and I've screwed them from the back into the 5mm bit of ply. A couple of things to be careful of here. Firstly, you can see I've put about 8 layers of blue tape behind them and screwed through that, because then these will be more proud than the bar that we made, because you don't want that getting clamped straight to the workbench once it's in position. And I've also placed some cards as shims between them so that you get freedom of movement. So what I was going for there is that this can still move, but when it's quite high up, there's no issues. I got a feeling this might actually work. We'll see. Here's a funny thing. It's amazing how new problems come up as you're trying to solve another problem. Now, I was just tidying up this workbench, cleaning it up, using the hoover in order to show you the prototype and how it was fitted to the bench and what it was for. But as good as these pop-up dogs are, and they are, when you take them out and build around them, the dog holes fill up with dust debris. Now, on some workbenches, I've got a 3D pack where you get a cap underneath, you can unscrew it, let the dust out, but this bench is thick enough that I've just drilled down into the 2x4 beneath it. But I can't get it out. And that's where this week's sponsor comes in. And that sponsor is PCBWAY. And don't be fooled, they don't just make PCBs. They also do CNC machining, sheet metal fabrication, injection molding, and more importantly for me, 3D printing. You see, before I got my hands on a 3D printer, I thought that all of these freed and bought files that makers put online and on their websites was just something that wasn't available to me. But now with PCBWAY, that's not the case. Head over to their website, drag and drop your print file, add in the quantity, choose from the huge range of materials and colours, submit your request, which gets reviewed by an engineer. They give you an accurate price, you pay, and you get your part. Mine came in a matter of days. And it works. I'm going to stick that file in the bundle that I'm going to tell you about a little bit later on. But if you want to check out the services that PCBWAY offers yourself, I'll pop a link down below in the description for you. And I want to say thank you to PCBWAY for sponsoring this video. Now the dog holes are clear, let's get back to the build. Now it's really difficult for me to actually show you the side of the workbench where I've attached this, but it's there. It's what's holding this in place. Then this can sit on top. But the idea is simple. And please bear in mind, this is still a prototype, so take it easy on me, okay? Similar to the concept before. If you want your workbench tidying, your hose is here. Now straight away I can tell there's a little bit too much friction, but the rest of the time you can leave it stuck there on the side of your bench. Now this is where I thought I was being super clever, because when you're sanding with one of these and you're doing it for any decent amount of time, if you don't have the hose supported in any way, you got all the weight of the hose on the floor. So it ends up pulling the sander backwards and it gets really heavy and you end up with this in one hand and this in the other. Or like some people do, you become like a snake charmer or like Britney Spears. Whoa! You see my point? And this is where I think this is clever. Just slide this up. Obviously I'm going to get a locking pin of sorts in there if this concept is good, because that'll also make it tighter. But with the right friction at the top here, you can suddenly have this hose and all of its weight supported up here, and then all you've got to do is your sanding. Suddenly life becomes a little bit easier. We might just be onto something. Tell me what you think. Prototyping builds like this out of scrap wood are one of my favourite things to do. And both of these solutions could work absolutely perfectly with just a little bit of fine tuning. But off camera, I took the opportunity to take this even further. In the next 5 minutes or so, there's going to be enough detail so you can see my ideas, tell me what you think. But there's going to be a more in-depth video on my 3D printing for Woodworkers channel, which is coming out really soon. Because honestly, this is a scrap wood video at its heart. Everything in the 3D print solution you're going to find in a bundle which is on my website. I'll put a link down in the description, and there'll also be a link in the description for the new 3D printing for Woodworkers Start Making channel. If you're interested in 3D printing and you want to get ahead of the game, there's a link down in the description for the 3D print channel. Get subscribed and then you'll know when the first videos come out. But let's just quickly whiz through the solutions because I've added a few. And I've also done one job to the scrap wood build first. Let me just quickly show you that too. So we're right in the corner of my workshop here because the first job I've done is I've moved the sander holder right into a position on the edge where it doesn't bother anything else, so you can take it away nice and easily, and as we spoke about before, the wires and the hose don't affect anything beneath them. Those eagle-eyed amongst you will also notice that I've lowered the block that the dog goes into, because now the hose isn't bothering things above it. So that was job one. Now, I said this before, the wooden version is absolutely fine, but I like the tolerances a bit better with the 3D printer. So here's a very quick run through of what I've made with the 3D printer to replace some of the scraps. This replaces the clip with the dog hole for just popping it on your workbench. And I've also made one with screw holes in it if you want to have it permanently on the wall or on your workbench somewhere else. This is actually my more favoured solution to the problem. See, what I've done now is I've created a permanent clip. I've made the hole a little bit too tight for the hose so that you can tighten up 2 bolts, one on either side, and then this becomes a permanent fixture, just like the remote switches you might have on the hose. Does every job that the others did, even with the shorter dog that I've put on it so that it's not quite as in the way, even to the stage that you can still use the same block of wood that you drilled out for the other solution. But in my usual style, I did not stop there when it came to 3D printing, because I had an idea and I wanted to see if I could improve this. First of all, I made a docking port for it that you can just 3D print, and the tolerance is such that this will sit on the wall and it'll hold it in place. Now in the print files you'll notice the dogs are separate from the housings, so you glue them together. It's very simple with CA glue. What that means is you can choose between what I'm calling the sliding dog or the regular dog. Now the sliding dog, as you can see, has got a tapered groove, and what it does is it enables you to use this as the port. There's 2 little fins in here that will actually guide the sliding dog into place, and so instead of having to rely on the docking hole, which will do a perfectly good job, if you want to just pop this back on the wall somewhere or on your workbench, all you need to do is slide it into place, and the friction is such that it won't bounce out. And I think that is a really exciting addition. I've also spent the afternoon making sure that the bundles are compatible with the Festool, which is the 35mm hose, but also a 38, a 26 and a 32, which are the 4 most common sizes. And everything that you see that I developed in this and in more detail on the 3D print video, it's all going to be in there. But let's have a quick look at the main event. Now really this is the main event of what we've been working on. And this, I made sure the tolerances are really tight. And if you've made yours out of scrap wood, apart from putting a few pins in it, you don't need to do what I've done next. However, I have made 2 of these brackets. And these brackets are simple. You see, the bar itself fits perfectly with very little play. And then you've got these pins that when I've drilled some holes in here, will push in very nicely to stop it at certain heights. Keep the brackets close together, higher up the back of your workbench, because you want stability when it's at its highest point. As you can see here, I've also replaced the top section with a 3D printed hinge bracket. I haven't thought of a clever way of doing anything more than just putting a bolt in it to hold it closed, but it's strong, it's got the right tolerance that the hose will slip through easily and doesn't get snagged, and it's pretty robust. I'm going to go about testing this over the coming months because I think it's a really good addition to my workshop, but you never know with a prototype if it's going to work long term until you've actually used it long term. But I have high hopes because it takes up no space there. Next time I do a big panel sanding, well, if I'm using this, you'll know it was a success. But do remember, if you haven't got a 3D printer and you can't get these files, well, maybe consider sending them to PCBWAY and see how much it'll cost you to get them done, or stick with the scrapwood. Either way is great. If you've watched this far, thank you very much. I'd also like to thank my patrons because they've seen this, well, more than they probably wanted to while I've been trying to fix it up. If you want to help me with some prototyping on the next one, I'll leave a link for Patreon in the description. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, there's a really good chance you'll enjoy one of those. If you click or you head to Patreon, I'll see you over there. Thanks a lot.